19, 1925, Malcolm Little, or Malcolm X, was born in Omaha, Nebraska. In 1946, Malcolm X was sentenced to 10 years in prison for robbing a jewelry store in Boston. Malcolm spent his time in jail in Charleston, Massachusetts. There he received letters from his brothers Reginald about the Nation of Islam. Malcolm also did some research in the jail library and was introduced to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, who was the leader of the Nation of Islam. Malcolm liked what Elijah Muhammad was preaching and converted to Islam in 1947. The Nation of Islam is a group of people who practice the Muslim religion. This group sounded like a great way for black people to fight to be treated equally. When Malcolm was released from prison, he gathered up some things from his sister and headed for the Temple No. 1. Elijah Muhammad was the minister there. In 1953, Malcolm was made assistant minister and was sent to Boston to start a new temple. In 3 months, his temple was started, Temple No. 12. Malcolm studied under the religious teachings of Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam. Elijah Muhammad believed that white people purposefully went against African Americans who were fighting for their rights in order to obtain political, economic, and social success. The Nation of Islam also fought for a state of their own that was separate from whites. By 1952, Malcolm had become a devout follower of the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad, and had begun referring to his last name as X. This was because he saw his last name of Little to be his slave name, and X represented the name of the tribe he descended from in African. Before long, Malcolm X was appointed as minister of the Nation. Because Malcolm X was so articulate and charismatic, many people thought that the increase of the Nation of Islam followers from 500 in 1952 to 30,000 in 1963 was due solely to him. Crowds and increased media coverage of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam caused many onlookers to become suspicious. The FBI even began to spy on the Nation of Islam with bugs, wiretaps, and surveillance cameras to monitor their activities. There were mosques all around the United States, as well as sympathizers with the Nation of Islam from the black community. The ideas of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam provided a new way of thinking for African Americans. Although racial relations in the 1960s were high, the Nation of Islam put African Americans at the center of their worldview and separate from people who despised them. From April 13th to May 21st, 1964, Malcolm X traveled to Egypt, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Ghana, Morocco, and Algeria for personal and spiritual reasons. In the month of July, Malcolm embarked on a new journey to an Afro-Asian Solidarity Conference held in Cairo. Egypt's President Gamal Abdel Nasser invited Elijah Muhammad. Muhammad in turn asked his lieutenant Malcolm X to go to the conference first and prepare for his arrival. During his travels, he wrote letters and did interviews about his experiences, which were often surprising to people back in the United States. He made the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca, one of the 5 pillars of Islam faith. During this time, his understandings of humanity changed, as he now felt that Islam could unite Muslims of every race and nationality. Having made the Hajj, he was now El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. While in Ghana, Malcolm X started the Organization of Afro-American Unity. After announcing that he was no longer in the Black Muslim movement, Malcolm X advocated his desire to organize a group for the 22 million non-Muslim Afro-Americans. It was during his pilgrimage to Mecca that Malcolm X realized that his brothers in Africa earned independence faster than himself and the other Afro-Americans in America. The independent African nations did this by creating the Organization of African Unity and oppressing all of their differences. And I quote Malcolm X's motto, "We want freedom by any means necessary. We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary." This was the goal of the organization. He wanted to start the organization in Harlem, New York, where there was the largest number of people of African descent concentrated in one area. Malcolm X presented the charter in a public address on June 28, 1964, in Audubon Ballroom in 5 parts. The first part of the charter was establishment. The second part of the charter was self-defense. He stated the rights of the Constitution and said, "Only be nonviolent to those that are nonviolent to you." The third part was education. He advocates the importance of education in a person's life and the need to stop the racist education that was being taught to the children. Malcolm wanted Afro-Americans to be involved in the schools and make a difference. The fourth part was politics and economics, which Malcolm said were inseparable because politicians depend on money, and from the two of these powers arises social power. The final part of the charter was social. Malcolm X strongly advocated that this organization did not affect anyone but the Afro-Americans. I quote him on the social aspect when he says, "Any time we know that an unjust condition exists and it is illegal and unjust, we will strike at it by any means necessary, and strike also at whatever and whoever gets in the way." On February 14, 1965, 6 days before the assassination of Malcolm X, someone set fire to his home where he lived with his wife and 6 children. All of his family escaped out the back door unharmed. On February 21, 1965, only 39 years old, Malcolm X was assassinated. He was shot to death as he delivered a speech in Manhattan's Audubon Ballroom. The police said 7 bullets had struck Malcolm. 3 other Negroes were shot. 4 policemen took the stretcher and carried Malcolm through the crowd. The assassins were identified as black Muslims. Before midnight, a 22-year-old African American, Thomas Hagan, was charged with the killing. The police rescued him from the ballroom crowd. They were convicted of first-degree murder in March 1966. After the assassination, followers of Malcolm X retaliated and set Muslim mosques on fire in Harlem.